Your vendetta is tearing this family apart, my father declared in public for all to hear. For a second, the world expected me to break, to crumble under the weight of his words. Instead, I calmly pulled out a folder and asked, "Which part? The police report or the text messages? My name is Jenna, and I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where the world just drops out from under you, leaving you in a free fall with nothing to grab onto?" For me, that moment tasted like gravel and diesel fumes on a forgotten Texas service road. Just an hour ago, I was on top of the world. My dream, the rolling scone, my gourmet food truck that I had poured every last dime of my inheritance into, was polished, stocked, and humming with promise. The Austin Food and Wine Festival was less than 24 hours away. This was my moment, the culmination of years of scrimping and saving. My sister, Skylar, who'd offered to help for the weekend, pointed to the back. "Jen, I think the generator's making that weird noise again. Can you check it?" I didn't hesitate. I trusted her. I left the engine running and hopped out, kneeling on the dusty asphalt. 10 seconds. That's all it took. The low rumble of the engine shifted, the transmission clicked into drive, and when I looked up, stunned, I saw my beautiful blue truck my entire life speeding away. Skylar's silhouette was a blur behind the wheel, getting smaller and smaller, leaving me alone in a deafening silence. My phone, my wallet, my hope all locked inside. If you're watching this right now and you've ever felt that soul-crushing sting of betrayal from the one person you were supposed to be able to count on, just tap that like button as a quiet sign of solidarity. Because in that moment, I wasn't just stranded, I was erased. As the last traces of exhaust faded into the vast Texas sky, the shock began to curdle into a familiar, bitter recognition. This wasn't a random act of selfishness. It was the grand finale of a story that had been written since we were children. This was about being the anchor while my sister, Skylar, was allowed to be the kite. When our grandmother passed, she left us each an identical inheritance. I treated mine like a sacred seed, investing every penny into my business plan for the rolling scone. I supplemented it by working double shifts at a diner for years, my hands perpetually smelling of coffee and cleaning solution. My dream was built on calluses and exhaustion. Skylar's inheritance funded a 6-month backpacking trip through Europe and a closet full of clothes she wore once. When she returned, portfolio full of selfies and bank account empty, my parents praised her for finding herself. They paid her bills, co-signed for her apartment, and constantly reminded me how lucky I was to be so independent. "Your sister is a creative soul, Jenna," my mother would say. "She just feels things more deeply." They never saw my 14-hour days as creative. They saw my success not as a product of my labor, but as a stable family asset. My truck wasn't my dream. In their eyes, it was just the solution to Skylar's latest financial problem. Down in the comments, I want you to tell me just type a 1 if you were always the responsible one, or a 2 if you were the free spirit. There are no wrong answers, but I have a feeling a lot of us here know what it's like to be a 1. It's a quiet burden to carry, being the one who always has it together until the day you don't. And that unspoken rule that my purpose was to be the launch pad for her whims is exactly what finally exploded just 3 nights before she left me stranded. We were at my parents' house for our weekly Sunday dinner, and Skylar was buzzing about some last-minute party at her friend's lake house. Then, she casually dropped the bomb. "So, it's totally perfect. I'll just borrow the rolling scone for Saturday," she announced, not asked. "You'll already have it stocked for the festival, so it'll be super easy for me to cater the party." I remember just staring at her, the fork halfway to my mouth, trying to process the sheer audacity. She saw my years of work, my biggest professional opportunity, as a convenient, fully stocked party accessory. I looked at my parents, expecting them to see the insanity of it, but they just smiled, waiting for me to agree. This was my cue. I was supposed to be the ever-supportive big sister, sacrificing my dream for her fleeting social ambitions. But for the first time in my life, a word I'd swallowed 1,000 times finally broke free. "No," I said. The sound of it hung in the air, sharp and unfamiliar. "Skylar, no. The festival is my entire year's income. The truck is not available." The silence was immediate and icy. "Jenna, don't be so dramatic," my father said, his voice laced with disappointment. Family is supposed to support each other's ventures. My mother chimed in. She's just trying to be an entrepreneur like you, dear. Don't pull the ladder up behind you. They didn't hear me setting a boundary. They heard me committing an act of treason. That was the moment the plan was born. My one word of self-preservation was the trigger for my destruction. That single word, no, echoed in my head as I finally started to walk, the Texas sun beating down on my shoulders. I had no idea how far I was from anything, each step on the hot asphalt a mix of anger and pure, desolate fear. After what felt like an eternity, just as my legs were about to give out, the deafening roar of an air horn made me jump. A massive semi-truck had pulled over. The driver, a man named Earl with a face as kind and weathered as an old leather map, leaned out the window. "You look like you're in a world of trouble, miss." He didn't pry or judge. He just handed me an cold bottle of water and let me sit in his air-conditioned cab while I tried to form a coherent sentence. He drove me to the nearest sheriff's office in a small town that felt like it was 100 years in the past. The officer on duty, Deputy Miller, had a stern, tired look. I could see the skepticism in her eyes as I started my story. A stolen food truck? A sister? It had all the makings of a messy family squabble she didn't want to deal with. But as I detailed the upcoming festival, the business loan in my name, and the deliberate nature of being left miles from anywhere without a phone, her posture changed. She started typing, her knuckles rapping sharply on the keyboard. "Ma'am," she said, her voice suddenly cutting through the haze of my panic. "Grand theft auto and reckless endangerment are felony charges." It was the first time someone had put a real name to what had happened. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a crime. And you know, that small moment of validation from a complete stranger meant everything. Have you ever had a moment where a stranger showed you more compassion than you were getting from your own inner circle? If you have, I'd love for you to share a little bit of that story in the comments. Let's flood this space with proof that goodness exists. In that sterile, quiet office, a tiny spark of fight came back to life inside me. That tiny spark of fight was all I had to hold on to as Deputy Miller began the slow process of filing a report. She asked me if I had my parents' phone numbers so she could contact them. As I recited the numbers from memory, my own phone started buzzing from inside my bag. I was confused it should have been in the truck. Then I remembered, in her rush to get away, Skylar must have just tossed my entire handbag onto the asphalt. I'd scooped it up without thinking. The screen was cracked, and the battery was at 1%. But as soon as I plugged it into the charger on Deputy Miller's desk, it roared to life. A stream of notifications flooded the screen. Dozens of missed calls from my parents. And then I saw it. A new group chat invitation, family brainstorm. My mom had added me. My hands shook as I opened it and scrolled up, past a flood of frantic Jenna. "Where are you?" Texts. The history from the past 48 hours was laid bare. "Dad." She has no right to hoard that resource. I helped her with the initial business plan. "Mom." Skylar is so disappointed. Jenna needs to learn that her success is the family's success. Then, the message from Skylar that made the air leave my lungs. "Don't worry, I'll handle it. I'll make sure she understands." A few hours alone will give her time to think about her attitude. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It wasn't a desperate mistake. It was a coordinated attack. A punishment. A lesson designed by my own family to put me back in my place. And suddenly, this wasn't just about a stolen truck anymore. This was about my entire life. I couldn't even form words. I just pushed the phone across the desk, my finger pointing to Skylar's last message. Deputy Miller read it, her lips tightening into a thin, hard line. She looked from the screen to my face, and in her eyes, I saw the last shred of skepticism evaporate, replaced by a cold, protective fury. "This isn't a family squabble," she said, her voice now devoid of any bureaucratic softness. "This is a criminal conspiracy." She turned to her computer and began typing with a speed that was almost unnerving. "Jenna," she said after a moment, "I'm going to run your sister's name through a few systems. Has she ever had money problems you're aware of?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. Skylar's entire life was one long money problem, a series of fires my parents and I were expected to put out. There was always a maxed out credit card, a late car payment, a can't miss investment that went nowhere. I told her this, and the clicking of the keyboard continued. A few minutes later, she stopped and slowly turned her monitor to face me. Well, she said grimly, it seems she tried to solve her latest problem with your asset. On the screen was a loan application to a high-interest lender, filed 2 months ago. The applicant was Skylar Matthews. The amount was $25,000, and the collateral listed was one mobile food service vehicle, with the exact registration and VIN of my rolling scone. The application had been denied because her name wasn't on the title. The party wasn't the reason, it was the excuse. She hadn't just stolen my truck. She had been actively trying to steal my entire business, my financial identity, for months. The betrayal was deeper and darker than I could have ever imagined. Seeing that loan application on the screen, in stark black and white, flipped a switch inside my soul. The hurt didn't disappear, but it crystallized into a diamond-hard resolve. This was no longer a family drama to be sorted out with tears and guilt trips. This was a 5-alarm fire, and my entire future was about to burn down. The festival vendor check-in is at 6 a.m. tomorrow, I said to Deputy Miller, my voice devoid of the tremor I felt inside. My entire inventory, thousands of dollars of perishable goods, is spoiling in that truck right now. I need it back. She looked at me, gave a firm nod, and said, then let's go get your truck. An hour later, I was pulling up to my childhood home, not in my own car, but in the passenger seat of a sheriff's cruiser. The sight of my beautiful blue truck parked defiantly in their driveway was like a punch to the gut. Before we even reached the porch, the front door swung open and my mother appeared, her face a perfect performance of relieved panic. Jenna, thank heaven. We were about to call the police. We've been so worried sick. I just stared at her, my silence a weapon I'd never known I had. Deputy Miller stepped in front of me. Ma'am, we have reason to believe this vehicle was stolen. My mother's jaw dropped. Stolen? It's the family truck. It was just a silly misunderstanding. My father appeared behind her, his arms crossed in his usual stance of paternal authority. This is a private family matter, officer. Not according to these text messages planning the act, Deputy Miller countered, holding up her phone. The color drained from both their faces. That feeling of having someone in your corner, an authority they couldn't manipulate, was intoxicating. Think about a time you finally stood up for yourself. What was your catalyst? Comment with a 1 if it was an ally who backed you up, or a 2 if it was finding that undeniable proof that you were right. Let's see which one resonates more with all of you. In that moment, watching their power crumble under the weight of actual consequences, I felt a flicker of the person I was supposed to be. I got my truck back. I made it to the festival, running on fumes and a cold fury that felt like the only thing holding me together. I even turned a small profit. But the joy I'd once felt was gone, replaced by a constant, gnawing anxiety. The following weeks were a blur of trying to reclaim my life, to wash the memory of their betrayal off every surface of my business. I was back at my usual spot at the weekend farmers market, the familiar chatter of the crowd and the smell of fresh produce usually a comfort. But that Saturday, my sanctuary was invaded. I saw them from across the lawn, my father and Skylar, walking with a rehearsed, somber purpose directly toward my truck. They weren't there to fight, they were there to perform. As they approached, a hush fell over my little corner of the market. Jenna, my father said, his voice loud enough for at least 3 other vendors and all my customers to hear. We need to talk. Your mother is sick with worry. This vendetta of yours is tearing her apart. Before I could respond, Skylar stepped forward, her eyes brimming with perfectly timed tears. I'm so sorry, she sobbed, her voice cracking for dramatic effect. I know what I did was wrong. I was just so desperate. I miss you. Please, can we just go home and fix this? It was a breathtaking performance. In the space of 30 seconds, they'd recast the narrative. I wasn't the victim of a crime. I was the cruel, unforgiving daughter holding her family hostage over a mistake. They were using the public stage of my own community to shame me into submission. Every instinct I had screamed at me to make it stop. To apologize, to placate, to do anything to end the humiliating spectacle. The old Jenna would have crumbled. But the woman standing behind that counter, surrounded by the business she nearly lost, wasn't the old Jenna. I took a slow breath, calmly wiped my hands on my apron, and reached beneath the counter. I pulled out a heavy, waterproof document folder that had become my constant companion. I didn't open it to show the crowd. I simply placed it on the stainless steel countertop with a quiet, solid thud. "You're sorry you weren't thinking, Skylar?" I asked, my voice steady and low, cutting through her sobs. "Or are you sorry for the felony charge of grand theft auto that's detailed in this official police report?" I tapped the folder. I turned to my father. "And is Mom sick with worry about me, Dad? Or is she sick with worry that I have copies of the text messages where she helped plan this whole thing?" The color vanished from my father's face. Skylar's tears stopped as if a faucet had been turned off. "This isn't a vendetta," I continued, meeting his shocked gaze. "This folder is full of facts. The business registration in my name only. The title, the loan documents I signed. The insurance I pay for. Facts don't have feelings. They don't care about tearing a family apart." The power dynamic shifted so fast it was like the air pressure dropped. Their narrative, built on emotion and guilt, shattered against the unyielding wall of proof. It's amazing, isn't it, how emotional manipulation just withers in the face of cold, hard evidence. If you're watching this on a Monday night, maybe winding down from your day, just type the word "documented" in the comments as a personal commitment to trust your own reality. Keep your receipts, literally and figuratively. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the market, I realized my truth was stronger than their fiction. My father and Skylar stood there for a long moment, exposed and speechless in the bright morning sun. Then, without another word, they turned and practically fled, the crowd parting for them silently. I expected the aftermath to be a minefield of awkward glances and hushed whispers. I thought I'd be labeled as the girl with all the drama. I braced myself for the isolation. But what happened next was something their manipulative minds could never have predicted. First, Maria, who runs the flower stall across from me, came over and traded a huge bouquet of sunflowers for a coffee, saying, "Your truck looks a little sad. It needs these." Then, a line started to form, longer than I'd ever had before. People I'd only ever shared a polite nod with were buying a dozen scones, telling me to keep the change. A local food blogger who witnessed the whole thing posted a story that afternoon. It was titled "More Than Just Scones," and it spoke about integrity and resilience. The post was shared hundreds of times in our local foodie groups. My family tried to detonate a bomb in the center of my world, hoping the shrapnel of public opinion would take me down. But they didn't understand the world I'd built. It wasn't a fragile network held together by obligation. It was a strong, woven tapestry of people who respected hard work and authenticity. They saw the truth. The narrative they tried to control had been wrestled from their grasp, not by me, but by the quiet, steady support of my community. Their attempt to make me an outcast had only proven where I truly belonged. That outpouring of support from my community was the final piece of armor I didn't know I needed. It solidified a truth in my heart. I didn't need my family's approval to be whole. A week later, my mother called. The public shaming had failed, the anger had failed, so she resorted to the final weapon in the manipulator's handbook, medical guilt. "Jenna, your father," she began, her voice thick with fake tears, "the stress of this. His blood pressure is dangerously high. The doctor is worried. He said we have to resolve this. For your father's health. Please, one last meeting." The old me would have caved instantly. But the new me made a call to my father's doctor's office, confirming his last checkup was 6 months ago and he was perfectly fine. I agreed to meet them, but on my terms. A private back room at a neutral restaurant. I walked in and they had the table set with all my childhood favorites, a pathetic attempt at emotional ambush. I didn't sit down. I simply placed my evidence folder on the table. "His blood pressure is fine, Mom." I checked. The forced smiles on their faces vanished. "I'm not here to make peace," I said, my voice as calm and steady as the tabletop. "I'm here to close a chapter." One by one, I laid out the documents, the loan application, the bank statements showing years of financial disparity, printouts of the texts. For my entire life, this family has operated like a business where I was the sole, involuntary investor. Today, that investment ends. I am closing my account. It was the hardest, most terrifying, and most liberating decision I have ever made. Choosing to walk away from a dynamic that is actively destroying you is a profound act of self-preservation. If you've ever had to make that impossible choice for your own peace of mind, just write the words "I chose me" in the comments below. Let's create a space that honors that incredible strength. I was finally, officially, declaring my own emotional bankruptcy from their toxic enterprise. I left them sitting in that silent room with the folder of truth between them and walked out into the cool night air. For the first time, I felt like I could actually breathe, but I knew that feeling of freedom was fragile. It needed to be protected by action, not just words. The very next morning, I was in the office of a pro bono lawyer who worked with small business owners. By the end of the day, a restraining order was filed, and a formal cease and desist letter was sent via certified mail. They could no longer legally contact me or come near my business. Next came the hardest part. Every time I looked at my beautiful blue truck, I didn't see my dream anymore. I saw a crime scene. It was tainted. So, with a heavy heart, I listed the rolling scone for sale. It sold within a week. Watching it drive away felt like a funeral, but also like a baptism. I was letting go of the past to make way for the future. I took the money from the sale, combined it with a small business loan I was approved for, and signed a lease on a tiny, dusty, forgotten storefront in a quiet neighborhood. It needed everything: new paint, new plumbing, new wiring, but it had roots. It couldn't be driven away. The last step was the simplest and most profound. I walked into a phone store, picked a new number, and created a brand new email address. With one final click, I severed the digital leash that had kept me tethered to their chaos for my entire adult life. The silence that followed was golden. Standing alone in that dusty, empty storefront, with peeling paint and the faint smell of decay, I should have been terrified. The task of turning it into a welcoming cafe felt monumental, impossible for one person. But a funny thing happened when I finally disconnected from the people who were draining my energy. It created a vacuum, and the universe rushed in to fill it with kindness. The community I'd built at the farmer's market, the one my family had tried and failed to turn against me, became my construction crew. Maria from the flower stall showed up one day with a car full of plants, declaring the space needed better energy. Mr. Henderson, the quiet vegetable farmer, revealed he'd been a professional carpenter for 30 years and spent a weekend building me a stunning, rustic front counter from reclaimed barnwood. Other local business owners would stop by on their lunch breaks with coffee and advice, their support a constant source of fuel. We were a motley crew of bakers, farmers, lawyers, and florists, all covered in sawdust and paint, laughing as we brought my new dream to life. This was a family I was building, not one I was born into. It was a family bound by choice, respect, and a shared belief in new beginnings. That little shop wasn't just being built with wood and nails, it was being built with love. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? A chosen family. Think about your circle right now. Who is the person that isn't technically family, but is absolutely family in your heart? You don't have to name them, but if you have one, just write "my chosen family" in the comments to send that energy out into the world. Those bonds are some of the most precious things we will ever have. 3 months of paint, plaster, and pure grit later, we opened the doors. I named my new cafe the Grounded Scone. It was everything the Rolling Scone was not: stable, rooted, and immovable. The opening day was a beautiful, chaotic blur. The lines stretched down the block, a testament to the community that had rallied around me. The financial success was a relief, but I quickly realized that true recovery wasn't going to be found on a balance sheet. It had to be an inside job. I started seeing a therapist who helped me untangle the 30 years of complicated emotional knots my family had tied. She gave me words for what I had experienced: financial abuse, scapegoating, emotional manipulation. Giving the pain a name gave me power over it. As my own healing progressed, I felt a deep need to pay forward the kindness I had been shown. I saw so many women come into my cafe, other bakers, designers, artists, all running their own small businesses, and I could see the same look in their eyes that I once had, a mix of passion and exhaustion. So I started something simple. On the last Monday of every month, after we locked the doors, I host a free meetup called The Monthly Grind. It's a safe space for female entrepreneurs to talk, to vent, to share resources, and to know they aren't alone. We celebrate each other's victories and troubleshoot each other's disasters. Creating that space, turning the poison of my past into medicine for someone else's present, has been the most profound step in my healing journey. A year passed. My little cafe thrived, my new friendships deepened into a true family, and my life was quiet and full. But there was still one loose thread, one memory that still had the power to make my heart race. So, on the 1-year anniversary of that day, I did something that sounds crazy. I woke up before dawn, filled a thermos with coffee, and drove out to that same desolate service road. I parked in the exact spot where I had been abandoned, the gravel crunching under my tires in the exact same way. I got out of the car. The sun was just beginning to rise, spilling soft gold and pink light across the Texas landscape. The vast silence that had once terrified me now felt peaceful. It was no longer the sound of abandonment, but the sound of stillness. I leaned against the hood of my car, a reliable little sedan I'd bought with my own profits, and I poured myself a coffee from my own cafe. I had brought a scone with me, fresh from the oven that morning. I ate it there, watching the day begin, a quiet act of defiance against the memory of what had happened. This place no longer held any power over me. It wasn't a crime scene anymore, it was just a stretch of road. It was the place where the old Jenna had been broken down, yes, but it was also the birthplace of the woman I was today. I wasn't revisiting a trauma, I was paying my respects to the survivor who was born right here. I finished my scone, poured out the last of my coffee onto the dusty ground, and drove away, leaving nothing behind but a ghost. Driving back to my cafe that morning, with the sun warming my face, I realized the true meaning of my journey. For so long, I believed that family was a non-negotiable contract you were born into. You were expected to endure, to forgive, to sacrifice, because that's just what family does. But my story taught me a different, more powerful lesson. It taught me that you are the CEO of your own life. You have the absolute right to review the contracts, to check the balance sheets of your relationships, and to divest from anyone, family or not, who is a toxic asset. True family are the people who invest in your growth, who celebrate your success, and who bring you a shovel when you need to dig a new foundation. Not those who try to steal the one you already built. Setting a boundary is not an act of war, it is an act of profound self-respect. Walking away from a situation that is dimming your light is not selfish, it is essential. Your peace is the most valuable property you will ever own, and it is worth protecting at all costs. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives are born from the ashes of a story we thought we couldn't bear to see end. You just have to be brave enough to turn the page. My journey has been long, but sharing it with you has made me feel a little less alone. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of setting boundaries and the beauty of a chosen family, I invite you to hit that subscribe button and become a part of this community. Let's continue to be a space where we remind each other that building a life you love is always the right choice. Thank you, truly, for being here with me today.